Yeah.
Okay. Am I audible first of all? Okay. Any heads up? Atreya, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Um, hey guys, welcome. I'll be talking about one of my recent papers. It's called A Multi-Arm Bandit Approach to Subset Selection Under Constraints. The explanation would be clear in the coming slides, and it was a work jointly done between me, Kumar Abhishek is from my batch, 2015. He just graduated, and Professor Sujit. He's at the machine learning lab at IIIT Hyderabad. Okay, so let's jump into the paper. Okay, so what was the motivation behind this? So actually, we started looking at this organization called Golconda Handicrafts. It's a government-run organization, and we wanted to study artisan cooperatives and how they're structured, right? And I mean, is there something we can do to make them better, more efficient, right? So what we saw, and if you look at the diagram in the right, this is kind of a very rough kind of a hierarchy that is seen in such cooperatives where this Golconda Handicrafts has their showrooms across Hyderabad. They're the people who face the consumers. You buy it from them. They deal with cooperative societies, and each cooperative society is based out of town. They have this own heritage or tradition of some arts and crafts. So right there is Nirmal Toys, Bitri Craft. All of them are around Hyderabad. Right, and within each societies there could be 10 artisans or up to 100 artisans depending on how popular that kind of craft is. So and so these artisans are organized in a cooperative society, and there's usually a manager of that society, and the let's say here the Golconda Handicrafts deals with the manager to procure some item, right? So one of the problems that they face is they want to know what items to produce to procure, right? And it's a, I mean, in this case, each first of all, each kind of product, whether it's these toys or the metal objects or whatever, differ in quality. Their market demand changes and so on. And even on top of that, since it's a handmade product, the quality of each product also varies, right? Some could be very well polished, some may not be, and so on, right? So taking all these uncertainties into mind, they want to come up with a more efficient way of procuring products, or telling them or generating demand. Okay, you should produce so much of this particular product, you should produce so much of this particular product, right? And let's say the goal is to maximize the revenue of the entire cooperative societies as a whole, right? um, so yeah, this is one of the problems. I mean, they face many problems, marketing being one of them, but this was one problem where we could use our um, knowledge and skills to kind of help them. So this was the initial motivation. um, I mean, what I've discussed broadly lies under the category of subset selection. You are essentially you have a lot of agents, and you need to select a subset of these agents, right? And this kind of problem arises not only in such corporates but in most familiar marketplaces, whether it be e-commerce platforms, supermarkets. So for example, Amazon, they have so many sellers who are registered on the platform, and they need to choose at every time which sellers to display upon. Let's say if you should if you search for t-shirts, right? I mean, there might be thousands of sellers selling t-shirts, right? Which sellers? You don't want only the high cost variants, and you don't want the low quality variants. You want a mix of them, right? Similarly, supermarkets, like how many, you have so many regional farmers, how many apples to procure from each of them, right? And in most scenarios, the broader goal is to maximize revenue whilst ensuring certain quality standards, right? So I mean, agreed that Amazon and all does a lot of personalization and optimization on top of that, but this is just to introduce the problem, and we kind of attempt to address a very fundamental problem, which is, let's say you have n agents, right? Each agent is associated with a capacity of how many units it can produce, a cost of each produce, and quality, right? Now quality is kind of subjective, right? We'll talk a bit more about it later, but let's say we are able to define it, right? Somehow. So, and the expected utility to a planner upon selecting a particular agent is equal to RQI minus CI. So, uh, again, we'll see why this might be a reasonable metric. It could be so RQI could be assumed as the R can be assumed as a selling price. QI here is, let's say, the probability of being sold. So higher the quality, higher the probability of it being sold. Minus CI is the cost of procuring that product, right? And there's some average quality threshold. You want to make sure that the lot of the apples that you have that on display at your store or the collection meets a certain quality threshold, right? So this can be formulated into a very simple optimization problem where you want to maximize. So xi is, let's say, a decision variable which says whether or not you choose a particular agent, and the optimization problem is you want to maximize the utility under a constraint which is the average quality should be greater than alpha. It's a very simple problem. And there's nothing much new here till now, at least. So I'll stop here. If is there any questions, just understanding the problem or uh, anything up to this point?
Sorry, what is R? Capital R?
R, you could assume it's a constant. I mean, for the rest of the paper, you can assume it as a constant, but an equivalent to that in real life is, let's say, the selling price of that object, right? Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So far so good. I don't think it's very complicated. So this was kind of the motivation. This is where it started from, right? And sure, it's not very difficult to come up with a, let's say, a dynamic programming based solution for this. Uh, I mean, the one we proposed is called DPSS. So I'll not go into too many details because it's a pretty straightforward conversion from this optimization problem to this. But people, like, especially if you're in a first year, this is an interesting problem. You should just try and see if you can, if this is, let's say, a competitive programming question, and you want to you inputs are the qualities and cost and capacity for each agent. Can you come up with how do you select the subset? So it's not uh, a very direct problem. You need to do some tweaking, but you should be able to design a dynamic programming based solution. uh, a hint here is, like, I mean, here it's each unit brings in a revenue of R times QI minus CI at a cost of alpha minus QI. So in knapsack problems, you have a budget and you want. So this cost is not to be confused with the cost of the agent. Let's say this is the cost you incur taking, let's say, a sub quality, subpar quality product, right? And as you can see here, both the qualities, the revenue and cost can either be positive or negative. I do not have any constraint on if QI should be greater than CI or similarly, right? So, and an interesting thing is, how do you, I mean, the reason I've highlighted budget is you kind of just think about what the budget would be here if this is how you formulate as a dynamic programming um, problem, right? So, so far so good, I guess. We formulated into an optimization problem. Uh, a very straightforward thing to do in such cases is to see if you can solve it using dynamic programming based methods. Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? Uh, okay, can you explain the DP part of this a bit? Okay, so fair enough. So, Kunal, I don't want to get into too much details here as to where are we storing the DP bit. I think it's an iterative DP problem which you can try to solve, and like, how do I put it in a brief way that makes sense? Um, so let's say you have n agents, right? You choose at each step you have a choice of choosing a particular agent or not, right? So if it was a brute force way, you would have 2 to power n, like, you will go through all this 2 to power n thing, and at any point you want to uh, any agent can be selected or not selected, right? If you select, you gain a revenue. Again, that could be positive, negative, and you incur a cost of, because the net, the average quality of all the selected agents should be alpha, right? So if you're choosing a subpar quality agent, it should be matched with a probably one with a higher quality, right? And coming to the point of where you're storing pre-computed results, uh, I mean, you can create a DP array, and here it's slightly tricky. I mean, you need to quantize. Let's say quality needs to be quantized. For now, I've not really talked about this, but if you want to go into actually computing this and solving this, the qualities needs to be quantized. So depending on at what level of quantization you want to do of qualities, it could be, let's say, between 0 to 1, but what level of quantization? Depending on that, your size of the DP would change.
Uh, so like I had one doubt.
Yes.
So here like you are recursing, right? Like if I'm choosing say either the x
Yeah.
to be 0 or right, there are two
Yes.
recursion calls.
Yes.
So like, the part is that I'm also like having a doubt like where is the tiny learning happening? Like to me it looks like recursion. Like, so I have a doubt. Like, I also have a similar doubt. Like where is the tiny learning happening?
Okay, so here in this image, I have not specifically stored a, DP like this memorization matrix, and just for the space constraint, because ultimately, even in this DP solution, the time complexity can go as worst case as order to the power n, and again, as it depends on the quantization. So I've kept it as a very as a simple brute force recursive algorithm, as what you can see here, but it is very straightforward to add a memorization matrix, but that depends on this quantization bit. So to avoid discussion on that, because that was not the main aim of the paper, we skipped that in this picture. So assume that
Okay.
you have, yeah,
Hmm.
so don't get
Yeah.
confused by the picture.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. And
Does
like
that
you
make
were
sense?
saying that it could in worst case go to 2 to the power n. So I mean like the DP thing also, right? Like if I understood correctly.
Okay, so if it's a if it's a brute force computation, it's 2 to power n, right?
Okay.
If you do DP, then the computation will depends on what level of point. So let's say if you are dividing qualities in at every point 0, 1, right? So you have 100 qualities between 0 and 1, right? So if you look here, the decision making is based on two things: how many agents you have done, which is n, and the quality. And let's say if you have each quality, the worst case cost can be 1, right? Alpha minus qi both lie between 1. So n
Yeah.
times q, and this q will depend on the quantization. So it will be n square q, but q itself is exponential in the number of bits.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean
Yes.
you could have any level of discretization depending on the need of the user.
Yes.
If I end.
So that is a choice. I mean, the more you quantize, the more the granularity of quantization, the lesser the approximation.
Okay. Although like this algorithm is a little misleading in the sense that there is no like okay, I
Uh,
get
can,
it. Okay.
can you speak out a little louder? I couldn't hear that.
Like do we assume in the algorithm that it is already quantized or like how
No,
like
so I think, okay, it might be confusing from my part. I'm calling it DP, but I've presented a brute force algorithm. So that's probably a slightly confusing part. For now, assume it's a brute force algorithm 2 to power n. You can convert it into a DP easily by this quantization, which we do not talk about in this paper or in this slide, primarily because that was not the focus of this paper.
oh okay, okay.
Yeah, is that better? Okay, good. Any other doubts? Like, it's kind of important that at least till this part it's clear. Okay, so now this is where it becomes interesting. What if the qualities are unknown, right? And that is what happens in most cases. First of all, quality is a subjective metric, right? um, how do you really put a value to that, right? So one of the popular ways to do this is, I mean, the better the quality, the more it sells in the market, right? So and if that is a metric for defining quality, it's difficult to kind of tell what the quality is before it is sold in the market, right? So so Um, so I mean, if that is the metric, it kind of justifies us using the equation where revenue or the utilities are QI minus EI, which is the where QI can be considered as the probability of a product being sold, right? Now, this usually quality is unknown to the planner. Let's say this, in our case, the Golconda Handicraft, it's unknown to them as to what the individual utilities are at the starting, right? So they need to learn it as they go, right? They have to procure the product, see what is being sold, what is not being sold, and there's an exploration exploitation, right? So this is a very classical problem. I mean, especially people who are in the first years, you might there's a good chance you would come across these kind of problems where there's a trade-off between exploration and exploitation. Exploration, why? Because the more you explore about like choosing different handicraft peoples and all, you learn more and more about them, right? But what if you choose somebody who has a subpar quality, right? You may not make so much money. So you also want to make sure that the revenue that you make or the utility that is there is kind of you don't lose too much on that, right? So so here it's a classical exploration exploitation trade-off, and I mean, one of the popular ways to model this trade-off is multi-arm bandits, right? um, Okay, one thing that I'm realizing is that I should have had a slide explaining what multi-arm bandit problems are, but I'll try to give a quick overview. So, in a classical MAB problem, right, you have n arms. So, the motivation behind these kind of problems is, let's say, you go to a casino, there's a slot machine, right? So, what slot machines, how they usually work is each of these slot machines have an underlying distribution of rewards, right? So, let's say, for now, let's say each slot machine is basically a Gaussian function, right? If you pull the slot machine, if you pull the handle, you get a sample from that Gaussian distribution. I mean, clearly, if it's around the peak, the probability of getting that kind of reward, the mean reward is higher. Getting one of the very low or very high rewards is again not doesn't happen quite often, right? So now let's say you go to a casino and there are n slot machines, right? And you do not know what the distributions, underlying distributions for each of the slot machines are. So the problem is framed in such a way where you go, what you need to do is every time you pull an arm, you get a reward. And let's say every time, if there's a machine which is consistently giving you smaller rewards, you would not want to play on that machine, right? But similarly, if a machine is giving consistently giving high rewards, you might want to play on that, right? But there's no way to know this until you actually go and play. So again, it's a classical exploration exploitation trade-off. And let's say you had some X number of chances and you want to maximize the amount of money you come out with, right? So what is the best strategy, right? So this is the problem. And what is the best strategy? There is still no one best strategy. People have tried to come up with algorithms and they try to show what are called as regret bounds, which is had you known everything from before, what would have been the best way to best strategy versus what you did, what is the difference between those two, and that's called the regret because you regret that amount. So people have tried to show that regret should be of, let's say, sublinear regret or not. It should not be very high, so to speak. We'll come to that in a bit. So that is what a multi-arm bandit setting involves, and there have been multiple algorithms around multi-arm bandits and variants of this. A very popular one is called the upper confidence bound. What I'll try to do is probably share a link on one of the channels if somebody wants to read. It's an interesting problem and fun to read. So definitely recommend it. It's one of the go-to techniques if there's ever a exploration exploitation trade-off, right? Okay, so in our case also it's something like this. So we model it as a multi-arm bandit problem. Here each arm is associated with an unknown stochastic parameter quality. And since the planner can select multiple arms in each round, uh, it falls under this category or the variant where it is a combinatorial multi-arm bandit. So in that slot machine example, in one chance you can only pull one slot machine, but let's say in one chance you can pull 10 slot machines and you had X into 10 chances or something like that, then does your strategy change, right? So our setting falls under the umbrella of combinatorial multi-arm bandits. we can ignore the part of semi-banded feedback. Is just a technical term where you get to observe everything, and you might have cases where you do not observe everything. Okay, so now is the problem clear? Like, does it make sense? Why is this problem interesting? And what are the possible challenges that one might have to face? So, any questions on this? Okay, awesome. So I'll try to move on. I mean, an obvious question seems like, isn't there something that already addresses this, right? Is there existing literature around this? So yes and no. So there's this very popular paper around combinatorial multi-arm bandits, the CMAP with general reward functions by Chen et al. So how, I mean, the reason why their techniques cannot be applied in our setting is they assume that there's an availability of a finite feasible set of subsets. So here, let's say a subset is defined as one subset of arms or agents, right? So um, there are 2 to the power n possible subsets. Let's say you have n agents, there are 2 to the power n possible subsets of agents, right? So let's say you have this availability of a feasible set of subsets, right, to select from. Now, each of this, they refer to it, and maybe I'll be using this in my later presentation, but it's called a super arm. Let's say any subset of arms that you choose, let's call it a super arm. So you have a feasible set of super arms. But in our case, as we talked about, this feasible set, right, is the one that satisfies this quality constraint. So not all subsets would satisfy the quality constraint of the average quality of the qualities of those agents being greater than alpha, right? So in our setting, this feasible set is itself unknown and needs to be learned, unlike this paper by Shannon. Then there's this recent paper, and my prof was one of the co-authors on that, is where they consider constraints, but the objective function depends only on the agent's cost. So there the objective function does not depend on the unknown parameter, right? In our case, the objective function, which is the utility, is a function of quality, as we saw, right? And qualities are unknown. So in this paper, the only thing that is unknown, or the constraint, is the only thing that depends on quality. But in our case, both the constraint and the objective function depends on the unknown parameter. So there, I mean, to the best of our knowledge, there wasn't any work done which combines both of these things, where both the objective function and the constraint depends on the unknown parameter, right? Okay, so here comes sort of an algorithm. So again, so UCB, again, I'd encourage people to read more about it, but it's a very popular algorithm for any multi-arm bandit settings, and there have been extensions to it for all kinds of variants, right? So we ourselves propose a UCB based framework, and that framework assumes the availability of an offline subset selection algorithm. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have an oracle, which, if given an input of the qualities, cost, and this threshold, it will return you the most optimal output. And we have seen before that the DPSS algorithm does exactly that. And that was the whole motive of even talking about the DP solution in the first place, right? So I mean, so yeah, DPSS is our subset selection algorithm for this. I mean, is one of the possible subset selection algorithm, and later we'll show results which are based on DP being used as a subset selection algorithm, but you can have other ones as well. Now, how the algorithm proceeds is, there's a purely exploration phase, where what you do is, in a round robin fashion, you play all the super arms, right? And I mean, it's a combination. So if you do not have a limit on how many arms you can pull, you can just pull all the arms, right? So for a certain number of rounds, tau, which here, as we show, is equal to 3 ln by 2 epsilon 2 square, we'll come to what this number means. But for a certain threshold number of rounds, you play all the arms, right? You learn more about that, and after that, you try to balance your trade-off with your exploration and exploitation. So, okay, I'm sorry, there's been some noise that's coming. Okay, so where was I? Yeah, so I mean, there's a purely exploration phase and there's an exploration exploitation phase. Um, how this progresses, I'll not go too much into details, but I'll give you an intuition. So in any UCP based algorithm, you have an upper confidence bound for any metric. So here the unknown quality is the unknown quantity is your quality parameter, right? So for any this unknown stochastic parameter, in statistics in general, not just multi-arm bandits, if you want to estimate it, you try to sample from that distribution, right? And the more you sample, so Q is like the expected value of that distribution, and you want to know what Q is, right? You can never know for sure because it's a stochastic variable, but you'll try to make your estimate of that parameter as close to the actual value as possible. Like it should lie between this plus minus this with high confidence, right? And you have bounds in probability that you'll read about, and so this is called an upper confidence bound, where you have qi hat t is basically the empirical mean. So let's say if you have sampled a particular agent 5 times, every time you will observe a reward, what is the mean of that reward plus some constant. Let's not go into detail. That's a property of the UCP algorithm, right? So you have an optimistic, so this constant is in such a way that the probability that the actual value of Q is higher than this quantity, Qi hat T plus whatever constant is there, is very, very low, right? So it is an optimistic upper bound, like it should not be higher than this. And using that kind of optimistic higher bound, you can, I mean, show certain results, right? So even in our case, we want to show two results. One is constraint satisfaction. So that has always been the focus of a problem. How do you ensure that your constraint is satisfied most of the times, and you do not incur a lot of regret, right? Your loss of revenue shouldn't be high. So we show that the regret is sublinear, more specifically of order log t. We'll come to that in a bit. But any doubts till here? Atreya, feel free to let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow, and like if something needs more explanation.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Let's see. So I'm trying to see if I should get into the proofs right now or towards the end, depending on time and interest. Okay, so let me actually come to another interesting part of this paper, which is more of empirical results, and then we can come to the proofs based on time and interest and that. So as we saw, this DP approach is, let's say, or the brute force approach is order to the power n, right? Which makes it difficult to scale when n is large. So let's say if we want to deploy this with Amazon, right, which has, I don't know, hundreds and thousands of sellers, and they need to make a decision every second or every millisecond. This is a computationally very expensive approach, right? So, so we propose a greedy-based algorithm that runs in polynomial lines, but it provides an approximate solution to that. It's not always the most optimal solution. It's an approximate solution. And with any approximate solution, the thing to do is how good of an approximation that is, right? You have approximation ratios and so on. So, and so we propose this greedy subset selection. Again, feel free to go through it, but just to give an idea, it's simply, let's say you had a linearly relaxed variant of this problem. You had a fractional knapsack problem, let's say, and you just sort it greedily based on utility by cost or something like that. There's again a slight tweak because of the nature of the problem and the constraint, but you should be able to figure that out, right? And I think at least for the first years here on this talk, it's an interesting problem to solve nevertheless, right? So, and this greedy algorithm can also be used as a subset selection algorithm in the framework that we saw. and we'll refer to this algorithm as GSS UCB. So now the question comes is how fast and how approximate. So I mean, the fast result is not very surprising given one is order 2 power n and the other is n log n. So if you look at T DPSS colon T GSS, it's the ratio of the time taken by the DPSS algorithm by GSS algorithm. So DPSS is, and as n increases, it increases uh, significantly. We also do a comparison. So usually in optimization problems, we have solvers that are more optimal ways of solving these. So there are algorithms and for both linear programs and integer linear programs. So here we use one of the popular solvers. Again, not going into the details, but the solvers are supposed to work more efficiently and faster. And we can show that GSS works much faster even than the ILP, right? The ratios are, it do not change significantly with increasing n, but it's still in the range of 50 to 70 or so on, right? So that's one of the huge advantages of using GSS in this framework with respect to either DPSS and GSS. So now the question is, okay, how good is it, right? Is the approximation good enough for it to be practically useful? So theoretically speaking, and we can look at an example for that if interested, but theoretically speaking, uh, the approximation ratio can be arbitrarily small. I mean, here the ratio is defined as the utility achieved by GSS upon DPSS. So arbitrarily small means GSS can be arbitrarily small as a function, as a ratio of DPSS, right? Which is a bad thing, right? But if you look at it in practice, so the plot on, I mean, the left column, bottom one, this is a bar and whisker plot, and or a box plot, as if you're using matplotlib. So these bubbles are kind of outliers. So each bubble you can assume as a as one instance. So you repeat this experiment thousands and millions of times. So you have very few rare cases. So the orange line is the median, which is almost always one. The boxes are the 75 percentile quantile. These bubbles are the outliers. So on very, very, very few rare cases, you get approximation ratios which are close to, I don't know, near zero, less than 0.2, right? And if you look at in the graph on the right, this is the average approximation ratio. And in almost all cases for all n, the approximation ratio never goes below 0.9. And this holds true for both GSS and ILP, right? So ILP again is not optimal. It's an approximate algorithm, but it's a very good approximation and it runs fast.
I had one doubt.
Yes.
So like what data set did you use to like form these evaluations?
Oh, this was a completely simulated data set. So, I mean, in usually reinforcement learning problems, you can simulate your data set if you know. So what we did here was we assumed there, let's say, if you look n as, let's say, 20 agents, each agent we randomly from a uniform distribution gave it some quality, right? Which was hidden from your algorithm. So we generated a simulated data set, and every time you select this algorithm, your environment will give you a reward which was sampled from that distribution, right? So yes.
But how do you make sure that your simulated environment is similar to what you'd actually find in a real data set?
Okay, good question. Agreed. There is, you probably couldn't, right? And in fact, to be honest, it wouldn't be, right? The point here to show was not that it should be exactly similar to the real, but you take a motivation from a real world problem, formulate it in a theoretical way as to what represents that practical situation best, and try to prove results. What we can possibly show is that given a real data set, so a real data set might look like, uh, let's say if this Golconda handicrafts are dealing with, have been dealing and maintaining registers of these order purchases for over a year, then you can try to see what is the quality, if the qualities are actually a function of the sales that are happening, and so on and so forth. But at best, this is an approximation of the real world scenario. And if you're able to show this, hopefully it would work in the real world scenario. But that, I mean, that just has a lot of logistical challenges.
Also, like you said, ILP don't provide exact solution, but in my like experience with ILP solvers, they do provide given enough time to conclude. So like, can you clarify on that
So
part?
most
Like,
of the problems that you would give to your ILP, I don't think you'll ever find a. So I'm not sure if you have been exposed to any computational theory course, but these kind of a problems like traveling salesman or there's these combinatorial optimization problems. They are NP hard, right? So there is no possible way that you can get an exact solution in which is an algorithm which is not ordered 2 per n, right? So that is a theoretical result. So all these ILPs,
yeah, that
they
is fine. Of course, theoretically they cannot be solved, but given an instant, mixed integer programming or integer programming solvers can find like often like as in they can finish in polynomial time. Like they may not, but they can. It can happen that finish in say 10 seconds or whatever is the time. Let's say they give me
yeah,
100 seconds.
absolutely. Yeah. So like GSS, I an
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
approximate solution. So even if you look, the median here for GSS is 1, which means it gives the optimal solution. But so similarly, ILP in most cases it will give you an optimal solution. It is not guaranteed it will give you an optimal solution, and it works fast, right? It does not take order to per.
Okay, and like now, like you have compared the time of ILP to GSS. So say GSS received say 0.8 like of the optimality of ILP. Wouldn't it make sense to compare the optimality gap of 0.8 for ILP also? As in like what I see is that you have different like optimality gap for different time. As in like say GSS takes 66.7 seconds for n equal 25, but there say the optimality like the ratio is say 0.95 for example. So wouldn't it make sense to run the ILP solver for that optimality gap like till 0.95 is achieved and then compare these two quantities?
I am sorry, I did not get the question. So are you talking about the table which talks about the time complexity or the?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in the
Okay.
table, like in the right
Yeah.
table, and
Yeah.
EIPs to BSS. So
Yeah.
here, what is the ratio till you ran the ILP solver? Like what optimality
The
gap?
ratio is the time taken by my ILP solver and versus the GSS algorithm. So ILP solver takes whatever 66.7 times more than the GSS algorithm to solve an instance of that problem.
Yeah. So here the ILP solver is solving exactly right. Like if I'm correct.
Uh, I mean, we don't know that. For both
Isn't it?
ILP and GSS,
Sorry. You go ahead.
yeah, we don't know if it's giving an optimal solution.
But like the
So
CBC does give the optimality gap, right? Like I said, till what optimality gap it has achieved.
I did not plot that, to be honest.
Okay. But then
Yeah,
like
because
suppose
this is the optimality graph. So, okay, I do not know how ILP fares with respect to, let's say, DPSs. But from the graph, if you look at, so the graph on bottom right is log scale. So it's because I could run it for more n's, and here it is limited to n equal 20. But if you look at between 2 to 20 on the bottom graph, it's very similar to the one on top, right? So if the ratio between GSS to DPSS is the same as GSS to ILP, then my guess is that ratio of GSS and ILP, DPSS and ILP would be 1, and DPS is optimal. So yes, in most cases, ILP would be given an optimal solution, if not always.
okay, so assuming that ILP gives an optimal solution
Uh-huh.
and G gives a greedy solution, so isn't it a little unfair to compare the time of an exact solution to the time of an approximate solution? Like that is the question. Like if you compare two approximate solutions assuming the same ratio, then it makes sense. But suppose I have an exact solution and you have an approximate solution. Now we are comparing like two different things, right? Like as in they are inherently different. So the comparison, like I'm not able to get the advantage of this like comparison.
I mean, okay.
So,
So this comparison can be used to make. So let's say you are a retailer, right? So let's say you have what uh, around 1,000 retailers under your umbrella, right? And
okay,
ILP takes whatever X amount of seconds, and or GSS takes X amount of seconds, and ILP takes 30 times that amount of seconds, right?
yeah,
Now, as I mean, according to this table, right? So now, if your decision making frequency, like, do you have to take a decision every hour, every second, every day, or something? If if this X into 30 is less than that duration, let's say 1 day, right? Then sure, go ahead with ILP because you are getting the advantage of probably a more optimal solution, and the time is not a constraint. But if let's say time was a constraint and you had to use GSS for let's say Amazon every second 1,000, so a factor of 30 makes the difference, right? And if you look at the graph on the bottom right, that it's almost, I mean, the approximation is not very bad. It's 0.9. It's better than 0.9.
yeah,
So
yeah, I do with that. So my point is that assume say GSS achieves 0.92 on a problem. Okay, it's like 10 to the 5 agents are there, and the
okay,
ratio like achieved by GSS is 0.92. You can
okay,
make the ILP solvers run till 0.92. Okay, and it might be the case that the ILP solver takes less time than the GSS. I don't know. I'm just saying. It could happen that till that fraction of time it takes less time. But when it explodes, say it goes to 0.99 or 0.99, it takes much more time since it has to evaluate all the options and exhaust them to fully give an certificate of the optimal solution. So my concern is that till a
okay.
certain point, it can happen that it is better than, like, I don't know, I'm
Faster.
just saying, like, it could happen that
Uh,
it is better than before. But then after, like, when the approximation issue becomes smaller and smaller, it takes much more time for the ILP solver to complete.
I
So
get
that
it. So
is,
you are saying if you let the ILP solver, I mean, relax the constraints a bit and say, okay, even if you give me a solution which is zero point 0.9
yeah,
times the optimal solution, it's good enough. So in that
yeah,
case, ILP might run faster than GSS, is what you're saying.
yeah.
But yes,
And
okay,
like,
good point.
right, Guru, it's like they are much faster solvers than CoinOver. And like for a practical setting, they are only used, not seriously.
Okay, possibly. I mean, good point. Possibly worth exploring that. But yeah, I mean, agreed. Anything that works well in practice. Yeah. Okay, yeah, fair enough. So, okay, the Dipanshu, when do you say that the problem is solved? Um, so this is like not the multi-arm setting. This is just for the single instance of that optimization problem. So if you solve it in the sense, if you get the values of the decision variables, if you're able to solve it, that that is when you say that the problem is solved. Does that make sense? Is the question specific to this slide or something different?
Yeah, I think that.
Okay, cool. Okay, so this was again, this comparison was for the single instance of optimization problem, which, as even Nikhil said, there might be other solvers which work better. But what we actually want to see is how they work in a setting uh, where where the qualities are unknown and you learn over time. So here in both these graphs, the x-axis is the round. So as in when you try to, every round is one decision making point, right? It could be again once a day, once a second, right? And so we did not talk about these tau value, but assume that we were able to compute this values of tau, which is after which we prove that. So what we show is we compute this value of tau to be equal to 3 LNT. So it's again of order LNT. And we say that beyond this value of tau, the probability that the output of your algorithm returns a subset which satisfies the constraint is very, very high. So that is one important result of our paper. And this experiment, the graph on the left hand side, basically shows that. So for both GSS and DPSS, for GSS we don't have the proof, DPSS we have the proof. For both of them, the green line is corresponding to the tau corresponding to the green curve, red for red, blue for blue. And in all cases, the percentage number of times the quality constraint is satisfied is almost, why percentage? Because you're repeating this experiment, let's say 1,000,000 times. So how many times of those, whatever, 1,000 or million times was the quality constraint satisfied? So as you can see, after the line, after the green line, the green curve is almost 1, which is a testament that, right, so your algorithm returns a correct, so to see, subset. And similarly, I mean,
I one more tell you. So
yes.
here EPS is DPS is UCB, right?
My bad, yeah. I
So
actually
this is
did this correction
count.
in the camera already and forgot to correct it here. Yeah, thanks for that. So these are GSS UCB and DPSS UCB. Yeah. Similarly for the right graphs, is DPSS UCB and GSS UCB, right? And I mean, visually you can see that the regret is sublinear. Sublinear means if you draw a straight line, there is a straight line that you can draw such that your curve is always below that straight line, right? So these kind of graphs are kind of sublinear, and which is a desirable property in any of these multi-unbounded problems or algorithms, right? So both DPSS, we prove it to be of order log t, and GSS empirically, it's in fact performing better, but again, there are no guarantees, right? So, so yeah, I'll come to the theoretical results. They're actually interesting as to how we approach them. So would want to spend a time, but before that, I'll just end. I mean, there are, so this is one of the, I mean, we feel this is, we took a very basic problem and gave a solution and a framework around it. And it could be extended to a lot of varieties where you have a dynamic pool of agents, sellers come and go on your platform. Let's say you select a particular agent, you tell this artisan, okay, make me this product. Then he becomes unavailable for a certain time because there's a lead time associated with him making that product and delivering, right? So there is a field of sleeping bandits that kind of addresses this. And what if the agents don't want to reveal their cost? They have an incentive to lie. Let's say your payments depend on, okay, let's say I'm saying, okay, my cost is whatever, 1,000 rupees. You pay me, the planner pays me 1,000 rupees. So I have an incentive to lie because I can just say 1,500 rupees, right? So how do you design a mechanism so that this falls under? So we were actually working on the third point, but it did not. We were not able to complete it. But this again is a very interesting problem. How do you design a truthful mechanism? Uh, okay, so I'll stop here once, take questions, do discussions, and then probably touch upon the proofs and what was uh, like the methodology followed, at least, if not the complete proof. So,
So
okay,
like the
yeah,
interesting. Like, can you elaborate on the truthful part of it?
okay,
Like, what sense?
okay. So the truthful part is, so here, how it works is, it assumes, till now in all these discussion, it assumes that the planner knows what the cost of production for that manufacturer is, or it's, let's say, a bid. Let's say each artisan says, okay, I'll make this product for you for $1,000, right? So like, okay, and then for so the planner assumes that this is the cost he will have to incur if he procures that product, right? And based on these computations, it'll make a decision, right? So if you bid too high, that might go against your favor because you may not get selected and you may not get a payment. And if you bid too low, you are kind of cutting down on your cost, right? So ideally, what the planner wants is that uh, he should be able to know the exact cost of production for each artisan. It may vary, but I would want to know the exact cost of production so that I can make decisions accordingly, right? Uh, but you don't, as an individual artisans, you do not have an incentive to elicit that information truthfully, right? So, I mean, compare this to, I don't know if you have read about auction theory, but in auction theory, it's similar, right? Something is
Yeah.
being sold. Yeah. So the objective is how to come up with this. There's the second price auction, first price auction, but what is the strategy to have such that it is in the best interest of me to just say what my truthful, how much I value that product truthfully, right? Because there's no incentive to lie. So that all that design, this comes under mechanism design. So even in our case, how do you ensure that the individual producers reveal their cost truthfully?
Okay, I understand.
That makes sense. Um, any more like uh, anything else? Any questions? Also, time check, Atraya, what's the scene like? Like,
Oh,
do
it's
I have
fine.
to
You
wrap?
can extend over time if you need.
Okay. Um, okay. So, uh, I'll probably spend a little bit time of close the session and open up for question. So there were two properties that are desirable in our case. One is constraint satisfaction and other is sublinear regret. Constraint satisfaction, we want to ensure that it uh, uh, it's at the subset that you choose satisfy your quality constraint, right? So during the exploration phase, it's kind of difficult and counterproductive, right? If that is what you're hell bent on, you might not explore, right? So we give a leeway of, let's say, some tau rounds and say, uh, like what we want to show is that the probability that the subset that you select satisfies this quality constraint after tau rounds is very high, right? So now we break that into two parts. One is lemma 2, one is lemma 3. What lemma 2 says is, what we want to prove is that the difference between the average of QIT plus. So introducing some notations here, QIT plus is the upper confidence bound that we talked about is equals to QIT hat. QIT hat is the empirical mean, and there's some term that gets added to it. And this is what goes into your offline subset selection algorithm, right? So the difference between average of QIT hat plus and this over the agent. So this is basically what is uh, the difference between the empirical mean and the upper confidence bound. This is simply like, I mean, this is what you want to do is, and this is the average. So ST is the arms that you select in that particular round. So you do an average over that. And I mean, okay, I'll just wait a moment for you to read it. Probably that's more clear. I'll just introduce the notations. QIT hat is the empirical mean. If there's a plus superscript, it means the upper confidence bound. ST is a set of agents that are subset that you choose at any point t, and ST is the number of the cardinality of that set, right? And WIT is basically the number of times you have chosen that particular uh, agent since start till time t, right? So keeping this in mind, maybe you can just go through the proof once and then we can discuss. I think it'll be easier.
On the left hand side, like you have written that ensuring qualities is counterproductive. So like, can you
Okay.
explain a bit of how is it counterproductive?
Pardon, the left hand side, what have it's a counterproductive.
Yeah.
So counterproductive is basically okay. So again, it's an exploitation trade-off. And if you want to exploit on your knowledge and say, okay, I know certain arms. I mean, initially I explored some and it found out that they give good qualities. So you say just so that you need to ensure that the qualities constraint is met, you'll just try to play safe and choose the arms that you have explored initially, which showed a good reward, right? But that would prevent you from exploring. I mean, if that is such a hard constraint, it'll prevent you from exploring other arms. So that is why we kind of give a leeway and say it's like a burnout period in an MCM. Let's just I'll give you a leeway, uh, and you can explore all you want. But the leeway is constrained by order log t, so that the overall regret is bounded by this number. Right?
Okay.
Does, yeah. So okay, essentially the lemma 2, what it says is like the quantity inside is basically, if you look this term on the which you add, right? But this is averaged over all the arms that you select. So now each arm can be selected a different number of times. WIT might be different for each eye, right? But I mean, since all of the arms are being selected at least tau number of times, if you look at this, there's a explore phase where all the arms are being selected for at least tau number of times. Uh, and it's in denominator, so you can replace WIT with WT min, where for t greater than tau, and for everything, WIT will be greater than tau, basically, right? That's what we are saying. So if WIT is greater than tau, then this term becomes less than 3ln(t) by root 2 tau. And if you put tau is equal to 3ln(2), so this is a, let's say, a magical number. If you put tau is equal to 3ln(t) by 2 epsilon square, what you get is that this quantity is bounded by epsilon 2, right? So you make sure that the difference between the empirical mean and the upper confidence bound, the average of that, is bounded by some parameter epsilon 2, right? For tau equals 3ln(2) by 2 epsilon 2 square, right? Epsilon 2 is some constant. And lemma 3, what it says is, let's say now if let's say given that this empirical mean is greater than alpha, what is the probability that your actual mean, the Q average T, is based on the actual qualities, which you do not know. But given that the empirical mean you can ensure is greater than alpha, what is the probability that Q average T is less than alpha? Like there's a tolerance parameter of epsilon 1. So it's like, okay, alpha is my threshold, but I'll allow slightly less than alpha. But what is the probability that it goes even beyond that, right? So we do not want the probability of that to be high. So here, I mean, it's just, if you look, I mean, I'm forgetting the name of the theorem, but probability that a random variable is greater than the expected value plus something can be bounded by exponential of minus epsilon 1 square times the t is WT, basically, right? So, or sorry, the number of agents. So pi is a random variable and of the number of agents that you select. So, hence WT. So using this, you can kind of combining lemma 1 and lemma 2. So now what we are doing is, we are actually, when we call the subset selection algorithm, we allow it to choose a subset that returns a subset which is optimal, given that it satisfies the quality constraint with a threshold of alpha plus epsilon 2, so slightly higher than alpha. So if, and with qualities of this UCB, right? So what lemma 2 says is basically, if with the UCB qualities, your algorithm is ensuring that the subset has a quality of greater than average quality of alpha plus epsilon 2, then according to lemma 2, even if you use empirical means instead of actual mean, then the alpha threshold will hold. And the lemma 3, it expands further and says, since you are ensuring that this alpha quality is hold, the probability that the actual is not less than alpha minus epsilon 1 is very small, is exponentially small in terms of time. Time is the number of rounds. So this tells you that after a particular number of rounds, t tau equal 3ln(t), the probability is very, very small, right? Obviously contingent on the values epsilon 1 and epsilon 2, which is like epsilon 1 is a tolerance parameter, epsilon 2 is like how much leeway do you have into, you know, exploration, like how much more can you explore. Let's say Amazon, if it might, even in one day, it has 10,000 rounds of decision making, it might explore more versus, let's say, a cooperative which doesn't have so much of leeway. So any doubts on this? I think this is a Chebyshev's inequality in this. Any doubts? Oh yeah, Anirudh Chernoff. Sorry, yeah, my bad. Chernoff of Big Bang. Okay. So I'll actually bring in the paper here. I didn't know how it's actually going. Yeah, this is probably a more complicated proof, and it kind of derives from one of the previous papers. So I'll try to give a summary of how we approach so that if somebody is interested, they can know. So as we saw, there are three parts to it. One is this pure exploration phase. which lasts for tau rounds, and we saw that tau is bounded by ln(t) by 2 epsilon square. So let's assume even that in each of these rounds, the constraint is not satisfied, right? And we impose a big penalty, some high constant loss of L for on all these tau rounds. Then this is the first term of regret, and we can show that this is bound by L times 3 ln(t) by this. So again, this term is bounded by ln(t) because then tau is bound by ln(t). After tau, there can be two situations. One is that your constraint is satisfied. The other is that the constraint is not satisfied, right? So if the constraint is not satisfied, you incur a loss of L, and if the constraint is satisfied, you incur a loss given by RQ S star minus. So if you have S star is the subset which satisfies the constraint and has the optimal utility, like the maximum revenue, right? So this is what you would want to select every time if you knew all the information. So this is basically the utility. This is the regret that you incur if ST satisfies duality constraint, right? So now if we know, using this theorem 1, we had kind of bound, or theorem 2, we have bounded what is the probability that after tau, the constraint is not satisfied, right? So if you invoke that probability, you can show that the regret that incurs after this is almost order of 1 by t per a, where a is equal to 3 epsilon 1 square by 2 epsilon 2 square. These are just algebra, just write things down and simplify it. So this we showed to be again sublinear. The first term is sublinear because the number of time, like in the exploration phase, the time that exploration happens is again sublinear. The only thing left to show is that if we are able to show that the cumulative regret of the times when the quality constraint is satisfied is also sublinear, then our work is done, right? And this falls into the category of the CMAP paper, where given a feasible set, it proposes an algorithm where it maximizes the revenue. And you are not concerned about the constraint, because this is the case when the constraint is satisfied. When it is not satisfied, you are anyway incurring a loss of L, right? So you can follow that proof to show that algorithm follows certain properties. So what we show is we prove that yes, indeed, our algorithm DPSS follows the property of monotonicity, bounded smoothness, and using that we can show that even this term is sublinear. So a combination of all these three will also be sublinear. Yeah, okay. I don't know how much sense I made in that last part, but these were, so essentially the contributions of the paper was this framework that works for anything, and this framework we prove that it follows these two properties, and we showed a practical algorithm that again you can apply in that framework. If you apply it on that framework, it works very well in practice and achieves both these properties, right? So yep, essentially this is it. Any doubts, any questions, and any feedback? Okay, then.
In the dynamic part, you told that you can quantize the setting, right?
Yes. I mean,
for
experiments I did, but in the paper I didn't. So in the experiments I quantize it to like between 0 and 1, I quantize it to like 2 decimal places, 0.01, 0.02.
Okay. Just like I had one doubt, like, so when you quantize it, so like suppose the QI thing, which is like the quality, if it is say not a multiple of the quantization, then I don't think we can run the DP, right? If it's a multiple, then I understand we can run the DP. But
yes, so quantization, then you'll have to, like if it's let's say 0.015 or 0.14, then that is what the loss of information happens in quantization. I mean, for your case, then you'll have to assume it's 0.01 because you lose that information.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, sorry. For these experiments, I did not use quantization. I just ran a brute force, the algorithm that you mentioned.
Oh,
That is why we only do it for n equal 20.
Also, like you have proposed a deterministic algorithm, so like which like works very well for the like when the number of bits respond. So like would it be better to use ILP only in that setting also? Like as in given that it is very small, so probably
Yes,
like
you can possibly use ILP in this framework as a subset selection algorithm. Uh, Again, it might be difficult to prove these properties theoretically, but in practice, it might work as well. I mean, so I propose two ends. Like one is which is expensive computationally, but theoretically it satisfies your properties. One is like a faster variation, like one of the fastest where we could think of the greedy approach, which is not, uh, which may not theoretically achieve those properties, but in practice it works pretty well. But I acknowledge your point as to even ILP might have this relaxation of
no.
approximation.
So like I think ILP fits in the right nice middle ground since it's the fact that it gives you the approximation like it gives you the certificate of optimality. Like I've achieved 0.95 or whatever it's like whenever it's running, it gives you that I have achieved 0.95 of the optimal. So in that sense, you know, like suppose I have a threshold, like I want to say get 0.8 or better. So I run the ILP till that time, and whenever it's finished, like it crosses that threshold, then like yeah, I can use that result. So that is why I just feel
Okay.
that it might be a suitable choice.
Oh, okay. So I did not. Okay, I'm not sure. I'll have to go and check that if it always provides. I mean, I'm guessing it would provide a range and not an exact number because otherwise you can just multiply to get the actual.
As in like range of what?
I mean, you're saying that yeah, this ILP returns the approximation ratio also, no? When you saw it.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I'm saying it must be returning a range of that approximate because exactly if you can predict what's the approximation, then you can just multiply or divide to get the optimal solution, right?
Multiply or divide, like as in how
I mean,
multiply.
if you know that ILP returns a value x and it also returns that it is it is an approximation of 0.95, then you can do x by 0.95 to get what the optimal solution is, right?
No, so it relaxes the condition and then returns. Like in worst case, it is 0.95 of that. It could be that the original solution is better than 0.95, but in worst case, it is 0.95. So what the ILP claims is that at least I can ensure you that I'm in 0.95 of the solution. It actually might be
Yeah.
better than
Huh. Okay. So the range I was means
10.
like it is between 0.95 and 1. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is
So at least, yeah.
at
So
least
when
one.
it's 0.95, it is sure that it is above 0.95. But yeah, it could even be better than, yeah, you get my point.
Yeah. So that okay, if that's the case, that actually makes it an ideal thing to use in practice. And I mean, and yes, there's nothing stopping, which is the beauty of this framework. I mean, you can just uh, use that ILP in as your subset selection. Absolutely.
Yeah, like since the ILP code, like as the formulation is also very small, so like it, like seems that it could just be a better choice. Like you don't have to write even because
I mean, you can also make a package out of this thing, and it could be a function call. I mean, underlying algorithm of the ILP is still complex, right? It's just that you have a package that makes it small. But
yeah,
yeah,
of
I
course.
mean, it's not, I think, a factor in deciding which to use or not. But I totally agree with it. There are packages that give so much detailed information, it makes sense to use in practice. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Okay. Anything else? Yeah, nice questions. Thanks. Okay, thank you everyone. I think the link anyway Atreya posted on the paper, so feel free to have a read if there are still any questions or if you want to have discussions about what we could do next or if there's something expansion, happy to talk about that. So, yep, and with that, I'll end this talk. Thanks a lot, everyone, and staying to that.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for the talk. If you're interested in a follow-up or something, please feel free to ping because we're always looking for
Sure.
speakers. Uh, yeah. So I think I'll end the recording and we'll meet in.
Okay.